Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Double D Design. I'm Demon,
Dragon.
and yeah, today on Double D Design, uh, Dungeon Master issues, Game Master issues, DM, GM, whatever you want to call it. Just in general, more on the kind of player DM interaction side, I suppose, is where we want to put it. So Dragon, with your, I know you don't have as much experience dealing with players in general, but as a DM and as a player, I suppose, how do you go about dealing with uncooperative players? And I know that's kind of open ended, and you can kind of perceive and interpret uncooperative players as you will, but I'm gonna cede the floor to you and see what you have to say on the
Ugh.
matter.
Oh, geez. Just,
I know.
just, uh, just uh, completely give in to whatever they want. Just do what they say. It's fine. Just avoid conflict at all costs.
That's right. Yeah,
Not
just
really. Not
just
really.
lay down and die real quick.
No, it. Okay, so I kind of look at. I think I look at this kind of like negotiation tactics a little bit sometimes.
Ooh, yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah.
where can I carefully trick them into thinking it was their own idea for whatever we're arguing, or not arguing, but whatever there's a little bit of uncooperation over. Like
Yeah.
I want them to comply with. Sounds terrible, like I'm a cop, but I I I want them to comply with. If I want them to comply with whatever is going on in the world, we want to go to a certain quest. We want to do a. The whole party wants to do a thing, but this person doesn't. Trying to help them come to the conclusion that they should do that of their own volition, because they're not going to do it if I force them to as a DM. They're going to be like, "Well, I don't want to do that." Like, oh, okay. That's sometimes you just have to get them there very tactfully. I think,
Yeah, that's fair.
and this is talking in game stuff. This is like storyline, character choices, things like that. I'm not talking about like straight uncooperative, like at the table. External to the game meta.
Right. Yep.
If they're, you know, they want to do something annoying or disrespectful or whatever, then some of that needs to be confronted directly.
Yeah.
Uh, and that can be uncomfortable and that can be bad, but as long as you frame it with the reference of, hey, we're here to play a game and have fun, um, and this particular action that you're doing is causing an issue, yeah, you may lose that player, or they may just get worse. I don't know. It's tough. It's negotiation and it takes time sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. I've had a number of players over time who are uncooperative in both the game and meta sense, like you're kind of saying. Definitely like working it so that it was their idea, or having the help of the other players is always a great thing. Like, oh hey, you slash your character would want to do this quest because, oh hey, remember this thing? And yeah, like you said, that whole negotiation is really important, and being tactful in how you kind of deliver, I guess the direction giving, or the vector, I suppose. And
Yeah,
then
and
go ahead.
it it's there's so much more to uncooperative players, right? There's a lot of different types. Like
Yeah.
we're talking about not complying, being annoying at the table. How about inattentiveness?
Oh,
Like
oh, I hate
that
that.
one. That one's tough. And I mean, we're human beings. Sometimes people just need breaks, or sometimes people are not in the right headspace, or whatever. But inattentiveness, oh my gosh, I've experienced it as a DM and as a player.
Yeah.
So it's inattentiveness is rough. And then another one, if we're just listing off
Yeah,
some of
yeah,
these
yeah.
things, would be the chosen one.
Ooh.
With when one person is the center of the wants to be the center of the story the whole time.
Yeah.
That's difficult to deal with.
I
And
loathe that. Well,
full disclosure,
yeah.
sometimes I feel like I'm on the verge of doing that. There's days that when I'm a player in your campaign, I'm like, ooh, I need to back off a little. Like I'm being a little much. But
Oh,
I
yeah,
think
okay, that's fair.
I think most people don't have, not most people. I think some people don't have that self awareness.
Yeah, yeah. I
So
definitely I'll definitely talk to both of those. With the inattentiveness part, I when I was in college as a DM, there were folks that very thoroughly enjoyed using like Excel docs for their character sheets because it would do all their math and all that stuff. And I totally understand that. Sometimes it's hard to build a character and to make sure that you hit every point. And when you have an aid, an electronic aid to do that for you, that's really great. But the problem is we would play on like Saturday nights or Friday nights, and college football would be on. And my God, when I would be like sitting there describing a really serious scene, and then some dude sitting there like, yeah, foot touchdown. I'm like, dude, that happened to me in real life. Like, dude, what are you doing, man? Like, man, dude, do we need to stop? Like, is your football game more important than this? Like, if it is, then I told him in the moment. I was like, dude, we can stop the game right now, so you can watch your football game. We can come back to it, or you can leave. Like man, you got to confront that.
Or you can go.
It's one of those things of I knew the person fairly well, so I'm a little more. I can be a little more aggressive with people that I know fairly well. It's a little bit easier. Um, and then yeah, there was oh God, what was the other thing? Inattentiveness and oh no, what was the other thing that you brought up?
Oh God, you did it to me.
Yeah, we got that
Oh
short-term
no.
memory. Oh no.
No, it was inattentiveness, and then uh, bro.
Oh man, that's okay. We'll remember in 5 minutes and come back to it, or we won't. And the listeners will be like, "Dude, it was this thing. What are you talking about?" Um. Oh yeah, but yeah, that inattentiveness to being distracted with those outside
Oh,
factors.
the the chosen one.
The chosen one. Thank you. Oh my
Yeah.
God, dude. Like, there are people who have a complex both in and out of the game of like, I am the main character and you all are extras. And like, dude, that's not how you play a game. It's a cooperative game. Like, you know what? There are folks, I will admit, who, uh, because they end up being the face of the party or whatever, they end up taking the spotlight a lot of times. And I think that's different than a kind of a God chosen one complex. You know what I'm like? I think it's more important to like okay, vector people out of the spotlight if necessary, right? If you feel like not enough people are getting that spotlight time or screen time, whatever you want to call it, versus those folks who are like not only are they aware that they are the chosen one in their own minds, but like they don't care what anybody else thinks. Like those are the ones that are really problematic. I have had issues with folks like that before, and it's like, dude, you're not the only one playing the game, and the other players are not. They're not your support items. They're not like the potion that you can pull out at any time. Like, cleric, heal me because I have to complete this quest. It's like, hey, cleric, could you please heal me because I took a lot of damage because I was trying to help the party accomplish the quest to save the whatever. Like I don't know, like it's a lot of framing and definitely kind of knocking down that superiority complex. For sure. I almost said inferiority complex. Superiority complex.
The yeah, I get what you're saying. Yep.
Oh yeah. Definitely like if it's something that's oh man, I have a tendency to be a little more passive aggressive about it. I think initially, right, is like if I saw somebody physically at a table because I know we play online now. It's a lot easier to be like uh, hold people's attention. I think while online, to
Yeah.
be honest with you, because like you're more invested. You have to listen more closely. It's harder to kind of get a recap or something like that. But at the table, I know like I have a tendency to throw out like side looks and make the cough like, hey man, hey player name, like what just happened? Like what are you doing? What are you wanting to do in this situation? And then it's almost like oh man, like using embarrassment almost. It's like, hey dude, I just caught you doing that thing that you shouldn't be doing at the table. Let's reel it back in, and then usually that'll fix it. But if it's a chronic problem, I'll either address it in the moment, be like, hey player, what the hell are you doing? Like, come on, man,
So
like get in the game.
it's also I feel like it's not always a malicious or bad thing. Like
For sure.
everybody loses focus. We're all human beings. We do this. I've spent a lot of time teaching in a classroom, like adult learning stuff,
Yeah.
and yeah, even your star student, like somebody's like just gets it. Sometimes will zone out,
Oh
and then
yeah.
what do? You re-engage them, and then they're back in. They're done. You don't have to mess with them again. But like you were saying, it's the chronic ones that become a problem, and
Yeah.
even the chronic ones. I mean, we get back to like classroom teaching. Even the chronic ones, sometimes that's just their nature, and they are still engaged,
Right.
but they don't look like it.
Yes, that's a
Those are
big
the
point.
most infuriating. They don't look engaged, but they are.
And
How
that's
is that possible?
something as a DM I think you need, or GM you need to get used to is like you need to know your players to where like, oh, this person is not paying attention, let's re-engage, or this person doesn't look like they're paying attention, let's talk about it. Okay, they actually are. I know that behavior now. Now I can play around it or DM around it or whatever. Yeah, that's a really important point to bring up is that re-engagement because yeah, not always the stick doesn't always work for sure. Reeling them back into the game is definitely a huge thing.
And this episode so far sounds like a GM DM versus player. It's not. No, nope. That's not what it is.
Yeah,
It's
good point.
it's managing that relationship during a game that we're both there to play and have fun.
Yeah, that's right.
It's not a combat thing. It's just like you said at the beginning. This is well, this question itself. How do you deal with uncooperative or un? How do you deal with these problems that come up sometimes?
Yeah.
Not let's pick a fight with our players.
Yeah, to be clear, these things generally don't happen often, right? These are like usually onesie twosie every other, maybe every fourth, fifth session. Like it's usually not a big deal, especially if you can be civil and talk these things out. They're usually not a problem, and if you can work your way like the negotiation, right? Of like, okay, what can I do to help you be more engaged, or to help you pay more attention, or to help you be more cooperative with your party, and then if you can work those steps in to accommodate those people, but as long as it's not so far in as to like ruin the experience for everybody, if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
and and sometimes the inattentiveness problem is the GM's fault.
Absolutely. Oh yeah,
So
I will fully admit that sometimes I will ramble and like I will just exposition is
or
not always the best way.
split the party, right? You split the party, and
Ooh,
then we're off
yeah.
on an adventure with two players for an hour,
Yep.
and then the other ones are the other players are like, what am I? I guess I will check my college football game.
Yeah. I think that's an important mechanical issue with games. Is like party splitting. I think it's important for a dungeon master to be able to time manage, right? Is keeping those players engaged. Of like, okay, I'm going to spend 10 minutes with this half of the party. I'm going to spend 10 minutes with the next half, and just being able to transition that way. I know can be difficult, especially for larger groups. I had a play group, which this kills me to say. I had a play group that was 7 players for a long time, for, oh God, 3 years. And like, holy crap, that was hard to deal with, especially when people were like, oh, you know what? I'm going to split off in a group of two. I'm going to split off in a group of three. And I'm going to split off in a group of two. Like, holy crap, how do you juggle that? And it's a lot easier for smaller parties because generally speaking, they won't split. But if that does come up, yeah, time management and or else even better, I know there's a tactic where if you think it's going to take a long time to be like, hey players that aren't participating, we're going to do this thing for 20 30 minutes. Go get up from the table, get a snack, get your college
Oh
football
yeah,
game in and like, you know, get that out of here so you can re-engage when you come back, and then we'll pay more attention. We'll give them their this will be your break sort of deal.
yeah, absolutely. Um, I've had success in my last three sessions. Two of them you've been a player in, but
Right.
last three with just the sense of urgency placed on by the world.
Oh yeah.
Because we're the first session that I'm talking about was races. They were Drake races. We have talked about this in a previous episode, but
Yes.
Drake races. The next two are a flooding city. and the players were navigating and fighting and dealing with things through a city that is actively going through rising waters.
Yeah,
Um,
which was a great
that
time.
it actually made it really difficult to not pay attention because I mean, bro, we are in a flood.
Yeah, that sense of
So
urgency is a huge deal in keeping players engaged. If they feel like there's stakes involved, and if their characters are uh, involved even peripherally, it will grab a lot of players' attention. I think there's so many players that want to play the game not because necessarily somebody asked them to, but because they just want to play the game and hang out with their friends, and like it's an important time for them to either unwind or to go through some things. And I think we can do this in a later time, but like they want to be engaged and they want to help the DM tell the story and the other players tell their story. And this, I think that the story and their actions really can draw them in and want them to know, hey, what's going on next and what's going on right now, and planning out. I have had this problem as a player personally, is I hear something in the game going on, and then I'll become inattentive because I'm trying to plan my next move as a character. Whenever it gets to me, or oh, I just learned this tidbit of information. Now I got to plug it into my notes, and where does that fit into the story? And like I lose track because I got tunnel vision on the game. It's not necessarily the DM's fault, or even my fault as a player. It's just like, oh my god, I want to know more, and then I miss the next 5 minutes of whatever the hell's going on, and I feel like an asshole. But I think it's a
yeah,
good thing to want to know more and to try to piece the story together as a player. And I've had to be wrangled and corralled more than once. So nobody's perfect, and nobody will be able to navigate an entire campaign or a session or a one shot without some outside source or even inside source distracting a player or a DM.
yeah, and then I guess a different lens on some of this too is kind of the old. I've heard this many times. Like no player is more important than like no player thinks any other player is more important than themselves. Like they're going to be looking at what they're doing for their character. I mean, it's just a human nature thing. Like when a
Yeah,
cool thing happens, they would love to be a cool thing related to their character. Um, and that's okay.
yeah,
And that's just that. And it's not. That sounds really malicious and like shallow. Like people don't care about other people. Well, most of them do, and most are there to have a great time. But it's still super cool when somebody when your GM brings up a backstory piece for your character, and you're like, oh, that's cool, and then it intertwines with another character, and then wow, we're doing a thing.
yeah. I,
So yeah, go ahead.
I think that's really important note, right? Is that even a DM is they care about the party, right? But we care about the stories that we're telling and that the party is helping tell. So it's definitely that I think people are inherently a little bit more weighed on their own character side than the others.
Yeah. Yep.
I totally agree, and I think one part of wanting a character to do something cool or uh, something different and being different. I know we only really have I only really have experience. Let me correct myself here with D&D Fifth Edition and Pathfinder, both First and Second Edition, as a DM anyway. And there are character classes or character choices that you can make, mechanically speaking, that as a DM I find can be really, really annoying. That make me work really, really hard, and that's
Uh huh.
not necessarily a problem that the player themselves are intentionally generating, but I work really hard as a DM, and I know you do as well. And it's like, man, sometimes I have to plan around a player's, oh, I don't know, armor class of 42, and their massive creature that is totally legal that can do 8 attacks in one turn. Shout out to Doc there.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, how do you? I'm not sure how much experience you've had with it, but how do you deal with players' characters' mechanics that that make you for lack of a better term, like work too hard if you've even dealt with it.
Eyes of the Runekeeper, like hands down. Like my one of my players has Eyes of the Runekeeper Warlock feature, lets him read anything.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
that's
super
rough.
super frustrating because I constantly forget about it, and then I sit down. Right now, I'm writing a dungeon sort. It's not really a sort of. I don't want to give away too much because you are a player in the
Sure,
next round,
sure,
but
sure.
sort of this dungeon thing. It's kind of a Stonehenge type look to it, and I'm thinking these stones and it's going to have runes all over it that they can't read some ancient language, and I'm boom done.
Oh yeah.
But Eyes of the Runekeeper.
Yep.
Uh, Man, I got to go ahead and figure out what does every rune say. Well, you know what? No runes. We're done.
Yeah.
It's just rocks. They've been worn off by the weather. They're gone.
Yeah,
Uh,
written language and runes and like trying to do puzzles, I can see as being really difficult with that ability specifically.
yeah. Well, and
And
there's nuance to that ability as well. But
true,
that's just so. How do you deal with that? Is the question.
right?
Um, so this particular one, just being really creative on the fly, because I've done it. There was, in fact, my players before you joined were sleeping in a cave, and there was a piece of stone with runes on it, and of course my player, she goes, well, what does it say? And I was like, ah, crap. What I did is I said something like, beware, don't enter the, and it was like broken in half. It was only half of the
Oh,
rune.
right, yeah.
So you couldn't read the whole thing. And I was like, I don't know, beware of the what? I have no idea. Which, something. Beware of something.
Yep. Yeah.
So, trying to get creative with how you respond to some of those things. Um, Gosh, there was another one I read about just the other day. I was actually reading about this topic on Reddit or somewhere. Um, Man, a player's ability to do something that got really, really frustrating. It wasn't Eyes of the Runekeeper. It was very similar though.
Right.
I can't remember.
Yeah, that's okay.
Uh,
Not a big deal. That happens. We were just having a brain fart 10 minutes ago. And it'll happen again. As
yeah,
we
that was a
tend to
pretty rough
do.
one.
Yeah, it was. It
This is
was.
kind of like the first time, right? Like,
Yeah. Yeah. Man. Mechanically speaking, the things that I have trouble with, um, not necessarily a player's fault, but I will admit any character that requires external help to be better. So, for example, wizards. In Pathfinder First Edition, wizards only get a set number of spells per level, but they can learn as many spells as they want within certain rule sets. And this goes for alchemists in second edition as well, right? Alchemists only get a set number of formula, and I, as the DM, right, need to think of rewards that actually will be useful or something that'll be cool. And it's not that it's, oh my god, this is such a struggle. It's the worst thing on the planet. It's just an extra thing that I hadn't even initially considered. Especially for one of our players was a wizard in the prior campaign, and my god, trying to get that guy scrolls, but like making it a reasonable place to put scrolls and making it believable, and then also like, well, what could he use? What would he want? Why would he want this spell? This spell's really stupid. Well, I don't know. What the hell? He might want it. Well, oh, actually, it's outside of his school, and you see where I'm kind of going here of that
yeah,
kind of rabbit
I'm
hole.
really glad you brought that one up because that kind of puts a pin in a problem that a problem that I'm having. Right,
Ooh,
dealing with a party with a warlock, a sorcerer, and a druid.
ooh,
Um,
yes, the
like,
imbalanced
oh
party.
god, yeah, this one is like, oh, and then that also causes issues with encounter building. Where's their tank? Where's their kind of frontline person? I don't know.
Yeah, they don't
Uh,
really have one.
y'all fought a water weird in the last session, and that was, bro, that could have got really gross real quick.
That was terrifying. Yeah, no. So we were all level 3 at the time, and that water weird, I was throwing spells at it constantly. And let me tell you, I was just about out of spells, and then that thing hit me once, and my God, a third of my life disappeared. I was like, "Oh no, I don't know what to do
Yep.
anymore." Uh,
And the grapple attack is supposed to attempt to drown you as well.
oh yeah, and so
So
that's an important
yeah,
thing as a DM is being able to like nerf or power up your creatures for sure for encounters. there was an encounter I had planned in the campaign, the Pathfinder campaign previous to this one. If you remember, Dragon, you guys were underwater. This underwater has come up a number of times. You're under the sea, and you were in the sea god's sunken temple, where there was some nefarious, evil things going on, and 7 players. So I have to consider that's just a problem in and of itself, right? Is dealing with too many
Yeah.
players. Okay, well they're level. Oh God, you were like level 12 or something at the time. I was like, okay, how do I put something out there to work the action economy so that it doesn't just die in the first round? Okay, now that I've dealt with that, okay, well the combined average output of this party is over 100 HP around. Okay, how do I deal with that? Well, I'm going to add more HP. Okay, now I'm going to add an extra creature. And then I'm going to, you know what? This creature, a combat rating should be like maybe a 13 to be like really challenging, or even a 14 to be deadly. I ended up throwing 2 level CR 15 creatures at you because, like, you know what? I know that these things are going to die, and I need them to do damage. And I mean, it's a way to kind of drive up the stakes and to keep those players, attention and involved and engaged in the game. Is when like their character takes like 70 damage on one attack. Like, oh my god, holy crap! Now what do I do? But you have to, as a DM, kind of plan how do you keep the encounters interesting, but make the players keep them involved, but not make them feel like they're consistently being overrun every time or that I'm against them. And that's a tricky balance, especially with parties like that one, Dragon, where it's a sorcerer and a warlock and a druid and a DMPC cleric. Like, there's no tank
Oh
there.
yeah, I forgot about her. I forgot about her. There is a DMPC cleric. It's not a DMPC. It's an NPC. But
I'm sorry, you're right.
we know what it is.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's true. The DMs in the house know exactly what we're
And
talking
and,
about.
and speaking of difficulties with players,
Yeah.
I tried to kill off my cleric NPC, and you didn't let it happen.
That's
No, it's
true.
fine. I didn't try to kill her. I tried to sideline her for a minute,
That's
but it
that's
was
true.
it was good. You wouldn't let me do it, and you know what? That is a great. It's actually a good example of uncooperative players.
Yeah.
I, as the GM, had an idea and a direction I wanted to take it, and I attempted to do it, and I did not force it. And I
Right.
feel like I learned that lesson in one of my very, very early sessions that I ran.
Ooh, tell me about
Um,
it.
my player wanted to steal so they got to the bottom of this dungeon thing, and there's a giant floating green crystal over a black nothingness hole. It's like it's elevated, and my player was a rogue, and she wanted to steal it.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, this crystal is about 500-600 pounds. You're not gonna be able to get it out. She's like, I don't care. I want it. And I was like, it's floating up over this area. And she's like, no, I want to steal the stone. I'm going to jump on it. And I was like, yeah, but you're gonna die probably. Are you sure? And we went back and forth forever. And finally, she's like, fine, I won't do it. And,
Yeah.
and it killed it. It was so bad. And what sucks is I looked back at it immediately after the session. I was like, I should have let her do it. This would have been great. She could have fallen into that hole, and who knows, that could have been an interplanar portal. It
Yeah.
could have taken her to the nine hells for all I know. It could have done all kinds of crazy things. It didn't have to kill her. Heck, she could have just hit the bottom of the hole. Who knows?
Yeah.
She could have floated with the crystal. She could have been imbued with power by that. She could have done all these things that would have made it really interesting. But instead, I was like, no, nope, no, you don't. You really shouldn't do that.
Yeah.
Um, that wasn't super fun. So I learned that, and that's kind of how I felt about this. Trying to get rid of my DMPC NPC
Yeah.
uh, was, I tried, I pushed a little, and then y'all rolled natural 20s, and it's just the way the players wanted it. So I'm not
Right.
going to go against that. Like I'll throw it out there, see what happens, and the players are actually saying no, they want this thing, and they don't want to say goodbye to this character. They're yeah, okay, well let's see how it goes. You
I,
know.
I think that's a really important point to make. Is that, yeah, the players want to do something, and most of the time, like 99% of the time, it's not because they're being malicious. It's because they want to do something, or they think something is important, or
Yeah.
they're like, oh, this will be really cool. Or like, oh, hey, I care about this character because I know the amount of time that this player or this DM, GM put into that character. So you got to understand that kind of bending to the player's wishes allows for a lot of those really cool story moments, and especially when the dice are fickle. We know this. The dice gods look down and they're like, you know what? You're being uncooperative today. Here's a natural 20, just to throw it into the mix. And
and
I was not going out of my way to make your life difficult on purpose, right? I was like, I like that NPC. I think that would be the right thing to do, would be to go get her. And you were able to kind of read in, or rather, oh god, weave in. There we go. Weave in one of the other characters' like backstories. Her patron got involved, and I was like, that's really cool. And you were able to give her the choice through a proper, I don't even say proper, but like a story hook that it attached to that player's backstory. I think it made her feel pretty important, and it worked with how the die rolls worked out, and I thought it was really fucking cool. And as DMs, right, you guys have to be aware of your ability to make those really cool moments and being creative on the fly, like that green gemstone, for sure. Just hey, yeah, you jump on that green gemstone and you're floating above the abyss. Now what are you gonna do? Like,
yeah, yeah,
putting that back onto the player, making them think, making them react, and I think having that creative ability to dodge the dip Dutch. Yeah, you know what I'm saying.
dot.
There you go. Thank you. I'm stumbling on my own tongue over here.
Yeah. And with that one next time on Double D Design, how to dealing with uncooperative DMs.
You're about
Yeah.
30 minutes early, but maybe,
No, I
just
just had to
maybe.
throw that in there. I just
That's
had to
right.
throw that in there. 'Cause,
Apollo has gifted you the gift of prophecy, and
uh,
you've been able to do that for the past
I,
freaking
I,
three.
yeah, I think I might fail this time. We'll see.
Well, I don't know.
Oh
Well, we
man.
got another 30 minutes to find out. I'm really curious to
Yeah.
see what Apollo gives you this time. Uh, but
Oh man.
definitely, you know, eh, there's no, there's very, very rarely such thing as a player who is so malicious that they're trying to ruin something. Most of the time, they're just trying to do something cool or trying to have fun, and they just,
And
maybe need a nudge in the right direction.
not all players are made for that certain play group,
That
and
is
not
true.
all DMs are made to run a game for a certain play group. Like it just doesn't always work that way. There are players who are different maturity levels, different. They're looking for different things out of the game.
Yeah.
They find different things interesting, funny, uh, whatever. So yeah, sometimes it's just not the group for you.
Yeah, and we've talked about it a couple of times. Like, you use comedy a lot in your games for your party, and I know a number of players that I have played with, and that would not find that very interesting.
Yeah,
And they would just be like super disengaged. But I love it. I love that. That's great. Maybe it's just because I haven't been a player in like 5 6 years, but and it's neither here nor there.
yeah.
Some
Or
players
you
are a
got
lot more flexible than others.
and I think the easiest example of this is, do I want an RP heavy game or do I want a dungeon crawl?
Oh
Right?
yes, that is
You
the,
know,
the simplest, I think,
yeah.
example for
Do I
sure.
want to roll dice and do stats, or do I want to try to, you know, utilize storytelling type mechanics to get through social situations? Just different ways to look at it, different kinds of players.
Absolutely. And there are you can always have mixes of those players if you as a DM are willing and want to mix and match those sorts of things. And if
Mm.
there are players who don't want that, then generally speaking, they'll probably leave of their own volition rather than be purposefully disruptive or destructive. There's very few people like that. I have heard of plenty of horror stories of the weird dude who makes a female character to be weird about it, and then or the hey, we're gonna be murder hobos and we don't care what you think, DM. Like, there are plenty of situations where you can break away from that, but setting those boundaries and those expectations beforehand, I think are very, very important.
Definitely. Um, and a lot of that's covered in the pregame rules, and not rules, but pregame, session zero type conversations,
Oh
especially
yeah.
when you talk about things like, okay, so you are. I would hope that you could identify a rules lawyer prior
Ooh.
to getting in that situation,
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
Um, you've played in my games. You know I'm a little loosey goosey with the rules.
Yeah, it's true.
We're doing the best we can. I do try to keep some modicum of order and justice in the system,
Yeah.
but sometimes like I think this came up. It had to do with the action economy last time, and I don't remember exactly what the situation was. And we're like, I don't know. And I said, here's how we're ruling, and here's how we're moving forward until maybe next session when I'm proven wrong. Um,
Right. Yes.
you know,
I,
some people will not like that.
no, no. And I think that's a real world, issue that needs to be discussed. Rules lawyers and, um, I am. I try not to be a rules lawyer type. Like I don't think I'm as loosey goosey. But I think that might be just a fact that I've been in Pathfinder for so long. Um, well, and then I was in
Well, and
D&D 3.5 before that, where it was like
and
super rules heavy.
Yeah, 5e is much. It is more loose,
Oh yeah.
and a lot more things are just based on a flat d20. So,
Yep.
it's definitely a little bit different. And I've taken that, and that's kind of how I've built my game and how I've decided to run it.
Yep.
Um, so,
I
yeah,
think as long as your players go into the game understanding that, then I think it'll be a lot easier to play those games. And you won't have nearly as many issues if you just roll in with a group that has no idea what's going on, and that can be problematic. You know, uh, Being able to communicate is a big, big, big deal as a DM, a GM, even a player. True, but definitely being able to have that communication, being willing to have those sit down conversations of saying, okay, what do you as a player want? Okay, an even more important topic, I think, is what don't you want? I think that's really important to have. Like, what are you okay as a player with seeing? What are you okay with me describing or interacting with? What kind of things do you want to avoid? I think that's a really big deal.
absolutely. And there's a lot of influencers that go into that. I think from the play group, how close are you as a play group? What do you know about each other? What are your views on several social topics? Like there's a lot of things. What are your experiences? What kind
Yeah,
of backgrounds do you have, like in the real world? I mean, there's things that can get real sensitive. And it's funny. I was talking about this, and I actually talked with you a little bit about like why do we play games like this? And they're applicable to a broad age range. And what do we really get out of them? Um, that ties back to you kind of delve into some dark areas sometimes,
yeah.
or you delve into areas that are kind of touchy.
I definitely agree there. There are so many real world things that people use tabletops to work through, but also to escape from.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
Gosh, my second campaign in my world in Levia, I'm gonna bare my soul here a little bit. Um, I've got some daddy issues to work through, to be clear. And one of the players' characters had a she's like, yeah, I know who my character's mom is, but I don't know who her dad is. I was like, oh, cool. I'm a make her father an important NPC, and without even realizing it, I was like working through some of my issues with that character, and I was like, oh man, this is like a therapy session unintentionally, and that's not something I had discussed with anybody beforehand, and like I know a few people noticed, but like most of the group didn't really. They're like, oh, that's a really cool NPC. That's pretty neat. And then they, moved on, right? But other people are like, hey, dude, are you okay? Like, do you want to talk about it? And um, yeah, it's important to be aware if you realize somebody is leaning heavily into something, or if you know them well enough, and say, hey, man, are you or dude, gal, whatever, man, gender neutral. are you sure you want to keep going? Do you need to take a break? Like, what can I do to kind of make this a better experience for you?
And now you got me going back and like trying to psychoanalyze myself and my character
Oh
selections.
yeah, oh yeah,
Oh,
and
uh,
that's a thing that um, home brewing as a DM kind of allows you to have more of that freedom, to have that self awareness of, hey, I'm using this NPC as a foil to this character because this player wants to work through something, or oh, hey, I'm specifically cutting out this idea because that player does not want to interact with XYZ,
yeah,
Um,
and it really comes back to session zero and understanding your players and yourself because you're here to have fun too. And some people really want to run a grim dark kind of campaign. They want to have something with that's very realistic. They
yeah,
want some realism, or maybe they want something that's completely bonkers fantasy, not even close to real. And I'm sure you probably picked up on this. I try to dig into, and I really enjoy the why do people really do things? Like what's the reality of why people act the way they act? And
yeah,
it's it's kind of how I look at history. I love reading history about people, not really events, but like, hey, let's talk about John F. Kennedy and why did he do the things he do and what was he like day to day and what were those little nuances? That's what I like to dig into with these type games. Some people don't want that.
yeah,
They don't want to have a character with a real motivation. They want a character who's out to kill bad guys and get gold.
yeah,
And I'm like, yeah, but why? And they're like, it doesn't matter. This is a game. So
yeah.
yeah,
That's true.
uh, really, that's some pretty personal choice stuff. And in the session zero, I think the big thing here we're also getting at is those big topics. You talk about things like slavery, murder. Well, murder happens objectively quite a bit in these, but heinous description of gore.
Oh yeah,
Is that something they want? Pedophilia, those kind of weird topics, things like that. Those are the things that really become like important to flesh out. Like, hey, do you want to delve into this? I'm planning to, or maybe not planning, but this is a part of my world or
right.
not.
Like,
Um,
hey, man, we're gonna go break up I want to include you guys are the heroes breaking up a slavery ring. Do I really want to do that? Do players want to interact with that kind of thing? What are the implications of, DMs? Like, you don't necessarily have to really, like, police yourselves, like, every single word. But, like, sometimes
no,
you'll
but
say something that has implications that people are like, hey, I'm not comfortable with that. Can we not talk about that? Or can we,
well,
retcon something? Or, you
we
know,
see it in movies and literature too.
oh yeah,
I think in Hollywood, we get sometimes you watch a show that's just a little too real on certain topics.
yep.
Some movies will come out and do that. I mean, to me, there's a couple Stephen King books that get into. I mean, I love them, but there's like a chapter or two in some of them. I'm just like, you know what? I would prefer to have just skipped that. Like, that's
Oh,
not a thing that I wanted to read.
let me be
So,
specific. Let's talk about it. At the very end of it, if you've read the book, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But yeah, there are definitely those topics that, and you know what? You're not going to cover everything in session zero. You're not. It's just impossible, right?
no,
But if you come up in a game, just remember, DMs, that like it's a cooperative game and everybody's here to have a good time. And you know what? I I have a tendency to enjoy the middle ground between Game of Thrones and Lord of the Rings. The middle ground, somewhere in there. Of like, yes, I don't need to necessarily show everybody getting dismembered, but like, oh hey, yeah, these monsters are dying and you're killing them in a horrific way. This is real. You just set something on fire and it exploded. Like, yeah, that's a
yeah,
thing that happens. And the political intrigue and all that crap. Like, I really love that shit. I am down for that all the time, but not everybody is. Uh,
yeah.
Definitely catering and tailoring your setting and your play group. Even I mean, I think I chose, the four of you that are in my current campaign. I chose the four of you because I had a general understanding of what you guys were okay with and what you guys kind of wanted, and then on top of that, I was like, hey guys, this is Yeah, I think I was very loose with it. I wasn't very specific. I was like, hey guys, is there anything you don't want to see? And this is the kind of campaign I'm running. A vampire nobility, evil overlords. People are cattle. Yeah, okay. Any objections? you know?
Yeah, yeah. And that can get real dark. It
Oh
can
yeah.
get real dark, and we are okay with where that might go.
Right.
Um, you know, and then being flexible too. If you did get into something that was not okay with one of the players, I would hope that we have good enough communication to be like, I actually wasn't crazy about that one. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Let's nix
Um,
that. Yeah.
yeah. All right. Yeah. So that's huge, and I think it's interesting. I'm starting to veer away from because one of my players. I'm starting to veer away from fights with fully sentient, like straight up like humans,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
or any kind of humanoid type race. I'm starting to veer away from him because it kind of bothers him.
Yeah.
He'd rather fight elementals and monsters and beasts and things that are not people. Like when you get into people, then you start asking, "Oh, it's a cultist." Well, who tricked him into that cult?
Right.
Why is he in that cult? Does he got kids?
Can we talk to this guy instead of lopping his head off?
Oh yeah, that's the thing. Every time it's a sentient, like self-conscious person,
Yeah.
it's let's talk him out of it. And I'm
Yeah.
like, no, it's an evil cultist. Kill him. And it's just a thing. It's just a thing.
Yeah, and
So
what are you as a DM willing to kind of glaze over? Like, yes, this guy's an evil cultist, but like, you're not gonna necessarily build this dude's backstory. You know,
yeah,
it's not. It's Cruella Deville before the last Cruella Deville movie. It's like, no, she's just evil. She wants to skin puppies because she's a terrible person, not because
yeah.
two Dalmatians pushed her mom over a ledge or some bullshit like that. Like, no,
Was
it's
that it?
yeah, you
Was
know
that
that.
a thing?
Yeah,
Oh
it
my
turns
gosh,
out that
whatever.
spoiler alert. Sorry. Yeah, that was the
You do
point.
that before this. You do it before the
Oh
spoiler.
well, you know what?
You know.
Well, I'm not editing this in post. It's just gonna happen. Um, it. Yeah,
Fair.
but yeah, like not every villain that you generate necessarily has to have a backstory where like they were tricked into being evil or they turned evil because of some event or trauma. Like no, sometimes people are just fucking evil. And you know
Yep.
what? If your players aren't comfortable with that, then either you need to find a play group that is comfortable with that, or you cater to those players and say, you know what? Yep, we're not going to talk about that. And if you bring up somebody who we can talk to, that's great. Or if we just end up fighting monsters like that, can't think, even even better. Because I as a player, I will do anything. But like you said, there are some people, and I think that's important as a player for those players listening out there is to like not everything's about you. Like we kind of talked about that kind of God complex earlier. Just keep in mind other people, and especially I've had a player do this where like one player was like, "Hey," to the group, "I'm uncomfortable with X," and then the other player was like, "Oh, so I'm gonna bring up X all the time." It's like, dude, that's super rude. Why would you do that? That's no, get out of here, man. You know.
Yeah. Yep.
And so
Ugh.
consider being considerate. It is a party. It's a cooperative party game. Like just be nice. Just be nice to each other.
Another one that's come up a lot, and it's actually come up in design of both Pathfinder 2e and in the more recent modules and additions to D&D 5e, is specifically race.
Oh yeah.
Race is a huge one right now, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And it specifically in my games where it strikes me that I'm starting to kind of have to adjust is stereotypically evil races:
Yep.
goblins, orcs, drow.
Yep.
Uh, those there's some hard fantasy tropes in my head. I mean, I grew up on Wheel of Time and Lord of the Rings, and like I just have this. I have it in my head that a goblin is not a good thing. Well, goblins are actually I'm a little more cool with, uh, but orcs and drow like they're societally that way for a reason.
Yeah.
Uh, and but my players, they may want to do something like that.
Yeah.
And I know our play group, where I am a player in your world, that was something I had to adjust to in your world. Is like I can be a goblin, and I am,
Yeah.
uh, because that's the way it is in Pathfinder. Like that, it's just you have the ability to do these things. Same thing for D&D at this point, but
Yeah.
it's definitely a topic that's a big discussion point across the game, not
Right.
just
Just
at the table.
tabletops in general, yeah, and
Yep.
in the
Yep.
world, and I think especially like a good chunk of that is I chose to include and to exclude certain races
Yeah.
in my
You don't
world.
have orcs,
I don't have orcs, and
right? And not at all. Yeah.
not at all. And for a long time, I didn't have halflings or gnomes. Mostly there was first edition rules that I didn't want to deal with, and then I was like, well, there's a lot of baggage attached to a lot of those things, and I was like, you know what, I just don't want to deal with it, and I'm just not going to. But and then goblins became a playable race. I'm like, okay, and so are hobgoblins even in Pathfinder 2. Um, well, okay, they're stereotypically evil, but like, why? Just because they're ugly and bow-legged and like no, this I don't know, man. That's picking up on some pretty harmful stereotypes. How can I turn that on its head? Like Pathfinder 2e has Drow, but like Drow are not a playable race yet. I'm sure they will be eventually. I don't think they even were in first edition, but second edition Drow are still evil. And I'm like, but why? Just because they're elves underground, or I'm like no? And if you look at how Drow were made back in the day, like yeah, there's some pretty harmful stereotypes that are there, both like racially and sexually. The guy who made them, to design them, is really fucking weird. I forget his name, but if you really want to look into it, it's some weird shit. He was into some weird stuff. But yeah, there's like some baggage that I'm not necessarily keen on delving into, and then or I'm gonna make a nation of monsters. Actually, I have two nation of quote unquote monsters that I'm like, yeah, gnolls are considered evil, and like maybe they're not. Maybe they have a kind of brutal society, but just because it's brutal to my or your vision doesn't mean they're evil necessarily. It's just maybe that's what they need to do to survive. Or hell, you can, as a DM, you have the power to change that and to flip those stereotypes on their heads and be like, no, this is wrong. Let me teach you about why goblins are really cool and how they can be cool and how they cannot be some stereotype of XYZ sort of deal.
Well, and even in the older, some of the fantasy, storytelling and writing, just literature wise, I mean, there's some R.A. Salvatore, like a great short story about. Uh, I don't know if we want to get into specific character names, but a particularly famous drow encounters a goblin, and they get into like the humanity of the goblin, right?
Yeah.
Because it was a particularly intelligent goblin, and it sat there and talked for a while, and I mean, so this isn't, it's not a new thing.
No. No.
It's been brought into sharper relief recently,
Right.
but it's not a new thing. This is a thing that's been around with the game for a while.
Yeah, and you as the DM have the power to deal with that if players want to deal with that. If players don't, and you don't, then like you can choose to ignore it. Um, but I think it's important to take those sorts of things into account. I know, for example, I am very uncomfortable using certain creatures from the monster manual because I know where they came from. Uh, there are certain Native American based monsters that I'm like, I'm not using this. It's there are certain cultures that if you name the creature like it's a bad thing. You don't do that, especially if you're a white guy who's just reading it out of a book. And even golems, golems are that's a Jewish thing. Like I'm not going to use a golem because that's no way. I'm not about to infringe on Jewish practices or culture by just appropriating it as some monster that you get to beat up and blow up. Like that. That's really uncomfortable with me personally. So definitely working through those harder issues and kind of drawing that line in the sand of like, okay, I'm willing to work, but up until a point.
Yeah. And now I'm having to take a note because I'm uneducated on something. I gotta go find out because I'm really interested in what that is.
Oh yeah, yeah. You know what? And that's a
Like,
good thing.
oh god.
Remember, DMs, you were learning all the time. Uh,
Uh,
just it's not a bad thing to find yourself in a situation where you didn't know something and you were ignorant. But it's worse when you're ignorant and then you begin to know something and you choose to learn and then you choose to ignore it anyway, which is sometimes human nature. But
yeah.
it is what it is, and just try to be better, try to learn every day and to grow, and then exclude or include things that you think are warranted or you know
Yeah,
kind of petering out there.
if I've got a serious problem or if I've got me or my players have a problem with some sort of major part of the game, especially if it's a part that I enjoy, because I get the Drow come from a weird background, and I'm not a full canon person with Drow, but I like the idea of a subterranean elven race that struggles to um, be seen equally. Like
Oh yeah,
I do see that as an interesting story mechanic. That without getting into racism necessarily, but more this is unusual. We're not used to seeing you, and you come from the caves. That's interesting. That's
it,
interesting to me.
right.
How do I deal with that with players who don't want that? Um, two things, in my opinion, just right off the top of my head. Two
Yeah,
ways: exclusion, and that means cutting it off and finding somewhere else for me as the DM to find that story and conflict.
yeah,
That's not that specific example.
yep,
Can be similar, but shouldn't be too similar, but can be similar. So exclusion, or just getting creative with storytelling and really explaining where it is, where it's from, and what the differences are, or what the defining characteristics are of this particular issue. And it's got to be in a creative way that really tears it away from the
yeah.
stereotypical or the canonic uh, trappings that you're trying to avoid.
Right. And so Dragon, the ultimate question here is if you had one word to describe what you just said, building those building that encounter, that race, that whole system setting. If you had one word for that, what would you describe it as? What would you say that word would be?
One word?
Yeah, one word, one word.
It's not two words hyphenated, is it?
I mean, it could be, it could be.
World building?
It's kind of like homebrew, don't you think?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it,
it is.
and that's really weird because as
Oh
we come up with the
man.
last 3 minutes of the the
I I
podcast,
didn't do it. I didn't do it.
I had
Dang it.
to I had to kind of lead you into it a
You
little
know
bit,
what?
but you know
You
what?
know
It
what?
was pretty close. I'll
Four
give you that
games
one.
in a row. Four or not four games. Four sessions or four podcasts in a row is too much to ask for. There's no way I can predict the future that often.
Yeah, I was trying to throw the
Uh,
softball, and you know what? Apollo was just not in your corner today.
well, see, I thought you were gonna throw the idea that I had for a session or for a topic at me, and I was like, well, that's just not fair. I'm just gonna be like, oh yeah, we need to talk about this.
Oh well, yeah. I
But
mean,
yeah.
I figured I'm just going through the list here. We've got homebrew, we've got, and you know what? The one after that is race-specific topics, i.e., Drow and Dwergar and things of that nature.
Ooh,
Just to kind of give a taste of the future, as it were.
my first DMPC, which is a bad word, DMPC. My first DMPC was a Durgar,
That's
pretty
right.
pretty well
And then
attached.
you
I like
killed
that
him.
guy. No, did I?
You.
No, no. I killed Ander the halfling.
Oh, he was an halfling. You're
He's
right. I thought he
yeah,
was a Dwergar.
the halfling's the one that's got crushed by the out of proportion Warforged. Um,
That's a good point. But
yeah.
maybe next time we'll talk about how DMPCs could maybe tie into homebrew. Ooh, if you have a
Oh
small
my
party.
gosh, DMPC is such a bad idea. Anyway, they're NPCs
Yes, they
with
are NPCs.
advanced stat blocks.
You know what? That's a really good way to put that. I'll have to agree with you on that one.
Yeah.
But hey, you know what? Thanks everybody for joining us on this little journey, this meandering talk about different problems and how we as TMs should at least look at them and confront them. But hey, next time we'll talk about some more homebrew stuff. I know we talked about a little bit of homebrew in the other ones, but this one will be a little more mechanically specific. Uh,
Oh boy,
oh boy. But hey, thank you guys for joining us and listening into Double D Design. I am Demon,
dragon.
and we'll talk to you guys next time. See ya!
See ya.